The asteroid was not supposed to exist. It came from the outer darkness of the Oort cloud. A wanderer dislodged from its ancient orbit by forces no one could predict. It was massive, 20 kilometers across, a mountain of iron and stone traveling at 50 kilometers per second. Astronomers spotted it 14 months before impact. The announcement sent shockwaves through a world that had always believed it was immortal. Dr. Mei Lin Zhang was the first to see it. She was working the night shift at the Pan-STARRS Observatory in Hawaii, processing data from the latest sky survey. The object appeared as a faint dot in a series of images, moving against the fixed background of stars. She ran the calculations once, then again, then a third time. The results were the same. She picked up the phone and called her supervisor. "I think I just found the end of the world," she said. Within hours, every major observatory on Earth was tracking the object. The numbers were confirmed. Impact probability, 100%. Impact location, uncertain, but somewhere in the northern hemisphere. Impact date, 14 months from detection. The governments of the world reacted with disbelief, then denial, then panic. Emergency sessions were called. The United Nations convened. Scientists were summoned to brief world leaders. The news leaked within days. The initial reports were cautious, filled with qualifiers and uncertainty. But the truth could not be hidden. An asteroid was coming, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. The first week was chaos. Markets crashed. Cities emptied as people fled to nowhere in particular. There were riots and looting and 1,000 other signs of civilization unraveling. But then something remarkable happened. The world came together. Not perfectly, not without conflict, but enough. A plan was formed. A desperate, improbable plan. They would build a ship. Not to save everyone. That was impossible. But to save a few. 100 people, selected from the billions, would be given a chance to carry humanity forward. They would leave Earth before the impact and travel to another star. They would find a new home. Or they would die trying. The project was called the Exodus Initiative. It would be the most ambitious undertaking in human history. And they had 14 months to make it work. Dr. Zhang watched the asteroid grow brighter in the sky each night. She thought about the irony of it. She had discovered the end of her world, and she would not be among the 100 chosen to leave it. She accepted that someone had to stay and document the end. She was a scientist, she would do her duty. But she wondered, in the quiet hours before dawn, if the 100 would succeed. If humanity would find a way to survive among the stars. She hoped so. She had to hope. It was all anyone had left. The world reacted to the news with a grief that transcended borders. In every country, in every language, people looked up at the sky and knew that their time was measured. Some turned to religion, others to denial. A few, a precious few, turned to action. The Exodus Initiative was announced by the United Nations General Assembly in a session that lasted 3 days and 3 nights. The plan was simple in concept but staggering in complexity. They would build a generation ship. They would select 100 people to represent all of humanity. They would send them to a star that might have a habitable planet. The science was uncertain. The engineering was unprecedented. The timeline was impossible. But they had no choice. The asteroid did not care about their doubts. The construction began immediately. Factories around the world retooled to produce components for the ship. Engineers worked around the clock, sleeping in shifts, living on coffee and adrenaline. The ship took shape in orbit, a skeleton of steel and carbon fiber that slowly grew into a vessel capable of carrying humanity's last hope. Dr. Mei Lin Zhang watched the construction from the observatory. She had been invited to join the crew, but she had declined. She was an astronomer, not a colonist. Her place was with the telescopes, tracking the asteroid, documenting the end. She spent her nights watching the rock grow larger in the sky. It was beautiful in a terrible way. A messenger of doom, lit by the distant sun. She calculated the impact time down to the second. She knew exactly when the world would end. She thought about her parents, who had died years before. She thought about her sister, who lived in another country. She thought about all the people she would never see again. The launch date was set. The ship would leave 3 days before impact. It would be close. Too close. But it was the only window that worked. Dr. Zhang watched the shuttle carry the last of the 100 to orbit. She watched the ship's engines ignite. She watched humanity's last hope disappear into the darkness. Then she turned back to her telescope. The asteroid was still coming. She would watch until the end. She owed the universe that much. The Exodus Initiative was headquartered in a converted bunker beneath the Swiss Alps. It was a facility designed to survive nuclear war. Built during a colder era. Now it housed the most ambitious engineering project in history. Commander Elena Vasquez arrived on a gray November morning. She was 42 years old. A veteran of the International Space Station and 2 Mars missions. She had spent more time in space than any other living human. She had been selected to lead the mission. When they told her, she had asked one question. Why me? Because you know how to keep people alive in impossible conditions. They said, and because you understand what it means to leave a world behind. She understood. She had been on the Mars mission when her mother died. She had watched the funeral via video feed. 50 million kilometers away. She knew what it meant to be separated from everything you loved. The ship was called the Last Ark. It was being constructed in orbit, piece by piece, using components built in factories around the world. It was not designed for comfort. It was designed for survival. There were cryopods for the long journey, hydroponic gardens for food, a closed-loop life support system that could sustain 100 people indefinitely. The target star was Kepler 442b, a planet in the habitable zone of a K-type star, 1,200 light-years away. The journey would take 50 years at relativistic speeds. The colonists would sleep for most of it, tended by a rotating crew of wakekeepers. The selection of the 100 was brutal. Millions applied. Thousands were interviewed. Hundreds were tested. In the end, 100 were chosen based on a combination of skills, genetics, psychological resilience, and pure luck. They were scientists and engineers, doctors and teachers, farmers and builders. They represented every continent, every culture, every walk of life. They were humanity's last lottery winners. Elena met them one by one in the weeks before launch. She learned their names, their stories, their fears. A botanist from Brazil who had never left her country. An engineer from Japan who had designed the ship's life support systems. A teacher from Kenya who had never wanted to leave Earth but had been selected for her genetic diversity. A pilot from Nigeria who had flown military missions and commercial airliners. They were strangers brought together by circumstance. They would have to become family. The launch date was set for 3 days before the predicted impact. They would watch Earth die from orbit. And then they would turn their backs on the only home humanity had ever known and fly into the unknown. Elena stood on a mountain overlook, looking at the stars. Somewhere up there, the last ark was being assembled. Somewhere up there, her future was waiting. She thought about her mother. She thought about Earth. She thought about the 100 people who had trusted her with their lives. I will not let you down, she whispered to the stars. The wind carried her words away into the darkness. The training facility was a converted military base in the Nevada desert. It was isolated, secure, and equipped with simulators that could replicate the conditions of space. The 100 arrived in waves, each group greeted by Commander Vasquez and her staff. The first weeks were overwhelming. There was so much to learn. The systems of the ship, the emergency protocols, the science of cryo-sleep, the basics of farming, construction, medicine. Everyone had a specialty, but everyone also needed backups. In a community of 100, every skill mattered. Amara struggled with the technical training. She was a teacher, not an engineer. The circuits and systems and maintenance schedules seemed like a foreign language. But she studied. She asked questions. She practiced until her hands remembered what her mind could not. She would not be a burden on the ship. She refused to be. James Chen thrived in the training environment. He had spent his life studying extremophiles, organisms that survived in impossible conditions. The training was just another extreme environment. He adapted. He learned. He helped others learn too. He became an unofficial tutor. Explaining complex systems in simple terms. Sarah Okonkwo was already familiar with most of the technology. She had helped build the ship. She knew its systems intimately. But she trained anyway, pushing herself to master every aspect of the vessel. She would be responsible for piloting the landing shuttles. She needed to be perfect. Taro Yamamoto divided his time between training and checking the cryopods. The pods were his responsibility. They were the most critical system on the ship. If they failed, the 100 would die before reaching their destination. He checked and rechecked every component. He ran simulations and stress tests. He would not allow a single pod to malfunction. David Muller spent his training time in the hydroponic gardens. The ship carried seeds from Earth, thousands of varieties of plants. He learned to grow them in zero gravity, in recycled water, in artificial light. He learned to coax life from the sterile environment of a metal ship. Elena watched them all. She saw their struggles and their triumphs. She saw the bonds forming between strangers who would become family. She saw the future of humanity taking shape. She gathered them together on the last night of training. Look at the stars, she said. They are our destination. They are our home now. We leave tomorrow. We will never see Earth again. But we will carry it with us. In our memories. In our stories. In the seeds we carry and the knowledge we hold. We are humanity now. All that is left of it. Let us make it count. The 100 looked up at the stars. Tomorrow, they would go to them. The final selection was announced on a cold December day. The list was broadcast simultaneously around the world. A moment of hope in an otherwise hopeless time. The 100 names were read aloud. Each one representing a life saved. A future preserved. Dr. James Chen was number 17. He was a xenobiologist. A man who had spent his career studying extremophiles in the deepest oceans and the highest mountains. He had never imagined he would be chosen to study life on another world. But here he was. Sarah Okonkwo was number 34. She was a lieutenant commander in the Space Force. A pilot who had logged thousands of hours in spacecraft and atmospheric craft. She had been part of the team that assembled the last Ark in orbit. She knew the ship better than anyone. Taro Yamamoto was number 51. He was a systems engineer who had designed the cryopods that would keep the 100 alive for the 50-year journey. He had tested them personally, spending a month in cryo-sleep to prove they were safe. He woke up with a new appreciation for the phrase cold as death. Amara Osei was number 72. She was a teacher from Accra, Ghana. Selected primarily for her genetic profile. She had never wanted to leave Earth. She had parents and siblings and a life she loved. But she had been chosen. And she could not refuse. The future of humanity depended on genetic diversity. And Amara carried markers that were underrepresented in the candidate pool. She left behind a family who understood why she had to go but still cried when she said goodbye. David Muller was number 88. He was a farmer from Iowa. A man who had spent his life growing corn and soybeans. He knew nothing about space or stars or the science of interstellar travel. But he knew how to grow food. And on a new world, that knowledge would be more valuable than any advanced degree. Each of the 100 had a story. Each of them had made peace with leaving. Each of them carried the weight of representing humanity. They gathered at the training facility in the weeks before launch. They learned the systems of the ship. They practiced emergency protocols. They built the relationships that would sustain them for the next 50 years. Elena watched them work. She saw the fear in their eyes and the determination in their movements. They were not heroes. They were ordinary people who had been given an extraordinary responsibility. She gathered them together on the night before launch. "Look around you," she said. "These are the people who will become your family. We come from different countries, different cultures, different lives. But from tomorrow, we are one thing above all else. We are the future of humanity." There was no applause, just 100 faces, looking at each other, understanding the weight of what they were about to do. They were the 100, and tomorrow, they would leave Earth forever. The launch window opened at dawn. The sky was clear, a perfect canvas for the most important moment in human history. The 100 were already in orbit. Aboard the last Ark, on the ground, the world watched. Every screen on every continent carried the feed from the ship's external cameras. The Earth hung below, blue and green and heartbreakingly beautiful. Elena stood on the bridge. Her crew was at their stations. The final checks were complete. All systems were green. She looked at the faces around her. Fear, hope, determination. They were ready. She opened the ship-wide channel. "This is Commander Vasquez," she said. "In a few moments, we will begin our departure burn. We will leave Earth orbit and begin our journey to Kepler 442b. The journey will take 50 years. Most of you will sleep for most of it, but you will wake. You will see a new world. And you will build a new home." She paused. "I will not lie to you. This is the hardest thing any human has ever attempted. We are leaving behind everything we have ever known. We are flying into the unknown. But we are doing it together. And that makes all the difference." She gave the order. "Engage the drive." The ship shuddered. The engines ignited. The Earth began to recede. On the ground, billions watched. Some cheered. Some cried. Some simply stared, unable to process what they were seeing. The ship grew smaller and smaller until it was just a point of light, indistinguishable from the stars. Dr. Mei Lin Zhang watched from her observatory. She tracked the ship until it was too faint for her instruments. Then she turned back to the asteroid. It was growing larger by the hour. The end was coming, but the beginning had already left. She allowed herself a small smile. Humanity had reached for the stars. And even if it fell, it would fall reaching. The asteroid struck 3 days later. The impact was cataclysmic. The world that had been home to billions ceased to exist in a single moment of fire and fury. But the ship was already far away, carrying the seeds of a new beginning, carrying the last of humanity, carrying hope. Launch day was clear and cold. The sky was a deep winter blue, the kind of blue that seems to go on forever. The last Ark hung in low Earth orbit, visible as a bright point of light moving steadily across the dawn sky. Elena had already been in space for 3 weeks, preparing the ship for arrival. She watched from the observation window as the final shuttle lifted off from Cape Canaveral, carrying the last of the 100. The shuttle docked 2 hours later. The hatch opened, and one by one, the 100 floated into their new home. Amara was the last aboard. She paused at the hatch and looked back at Earth through a small porthole. The planet was beautiful, blue and green and white, wrapped in the thin blanket of atmosphere that made life possible. She thought about her family. Her mother would be cooking breakfast now. The same breakfast she had cooked every day for 30 years. Her father would be reading the newspaper, grumbling about politics. Her siblings would be getting ready for work or school. Normal life. The life she was leaving behind forever. She turned away from the porthole and floated into the ship. The hatch closed behind her. The countdown began. 3 days. They had 3 days before the asteroid hit. 3 days to say goodbye to their world. The mood on the ship was somber. People gathered at the observation windows, watching Earth grow smaller as the ship prepared for its final departure burn. Some cried, some prayed, some just stared in silence. Elena made an announcement over the ship's intercom. In 72 hours, the asteroid will impact Earth, she said. We will be far enough away by then to observe it safely. I will not order anyone to watch, but I will be watching. I need to see it. I need to say goodbye. Most of the crew gathered at the windows when the time came. The ship had moved to a safe distance, 100,000 kilometers from Earth. The asteroid appeared as a bright point of light, growing brighter, larger. It struck the Atlantic Ocean, west of Africa. The impact was cataclysmic, a flash of light that outshone the sun, a shockwave that rippled across the globe. The oceans surged, the atmosphere burned. The planet that had been humanity's home for 200,000 years turned gray and brown and dead. Elena watched until the end. Then she turned away from the window. She thought about her mother's grave, somewhere in Argentina, now vaporized. She thought about the billions of people who had not been saved. She thought about the weight of the 100 lives now in her care. She wiped her eyes and walked to the bridge. Set course for Kepler 442b, she said. Engage the drive. The ship hummed. The stars began to move. Earth receded behind them. A dead world in a living universe. They were alone now. They were the last of humanity. And they had a long way to go. The departure from the solar system took 6 months. The ship accelerated slowly, building speed over time, pushing toward the velocity that would carry it across the light years. The awake crew for this first shift was carefully chosen. Elena led them. Sarah was there, monitoring the navigation systems. Taro was there, watching over the cryopods. James was there, studying the data from the interstellar medium. Dr. Patel was there, monitoring everyone's health. They worked in 12-hour shifts, with the remaining hours for rest and personal time. The routine was grueling, but it kept them sane. The first month was the hardest. The ship's systems were new, untested at this scale. There were failures and glitches and moments of panic. A coolant leak in the engine room, a malfunction in the water recycling system, a false alarm in the cryo bay that sent everyone running. Each crisis was met and overcome. The crew learned to trust each other. They learned to trust the ship. By the 3rd month, they had settled into a rhythm. The days blurred together, marked only by the changing shift schedules and the distant stars that crept past the viewports. Elena spent her free time in the observation dome, a small bubble of transparent material that looked out at the universe. She watched the stars shift as the ship accelerated. She watched the Milky Way grow brighter as they left the sun behind. She thought about the 100 sleepers, frozen in their pods, dreaming of a new world. She hoped they were dreaming of something beautiful. The ship passed the orbit of Pluto and left the solar system behind. The sun became just another star. Earth was gone, destroyed by the asteroid months ago. There was nothing to go back to. Only forward. Only the stars. Elena gathered the awake crew for a small ceremony. They had crossed the threshold. They were no longer in the solar system. They were in interstellar space. No human had ever been this far from home. No human had ever been this alone. We are the vanguard, Elena said. The first of our species to cross this boundary. We carry the hopes of everyone who came before us. And we carry the future of everyone who will come after. She raised a cup of recycled water. To the journey, she said. To the future. To humanity. They drank. The stars watched in silence. The ship continued its long flight into the unknown. The cryopods were arranged in concentric rings in the heart of the ship. There were 90 of them, each one a coffin of glass and metal that would hold a sleeping human for half a century. 10 crew members would remain awake at all times, rotating in shifts, maintaining the ship and watching over the sleepers. Taro checked each pod personally before the first cycle. He had designed these machines. He knew every circuit, every valve, every line of code, but seeing them filled with living people was different. It was humbling. Amara was the first to enter her pod. She lay down on the cold surface and looked up at the ceiling. Taro stood over her, checking the readings. "You will feel cold at first," he said. "Then you will feel nothing. You will sleep. And when you wake, we will be there." Amara nodded. She had prepared for this. She had said her goodbyes. She closed her eyes. The lid closed. The cooling began. One by one, the 90 entered their pods. The sleepers. The ones who would wake to a new world. Elena was among the awake crew for the first shift. She would stay conscious for the first 5 years, overseeing the departure from the solar system, handling any emergencies that arose. Then she would sleep for 20 years, wake for another shift, sleep again, and wake for the final approach. The pattern was designed to minimize the psychological toll of the journey. 50 years was too long for any human to stay awake, but 5 years was manageable. The first year was the hardest. The ship was quiet without the 90. The awake crew moved through the corridors like ghosts, speaking in hushed voices, carrying the weight of their mission. They celebrated the first anniversary of the launch with a small ceremony. They gathered in the common area and watched a recording of Earth, taken before the impact. Green forests, blue oceans, white clouds, the world that had been. No one spoke when the recording ended. They simply sat in silence, remembering. In the second year, the ship encountered its first crisis. A micrometeorite strike damaged one of the solar panels, reducing power output by 15%. Taro led a repair team on a spacewalk, working in the cold void to patch the damage. They succeeded. The ship continued. In the third year, a crew member developed a medical condition that required treatment. The ship's doctor, a woman named Dr. Patel, performed surgery in the tiny medical bay. The patient recovered. The ship continued. In the fourth year, the awake crew began to feel the strain. Isolation, confinement, the knowledge that they would never see Earth again. They developed rituals to cope. Movie nights, group meals, a weekly tradition where each person shared a memory from their life on Earth. They grew closer. They became family. In the fifth year, Elena prepared for her sleep cycle. She briefed her successor, a man named Commander Reyes. She showed him the systems, the schedules, the contingencies. Then she entered her pod. The lid closed. The cooling began. She dreamed of Earth, green forests, blue oceans, white clouds. She dreamed of home. The cryopods were works of engineering genius. They maintained the sleepers at a temperature just above freezing, slowing their biological processes to a crawl. The heart beat once every few minutes. Breathing was barely detectable. The body existed in a state between life and death, preserved for the long journey. Taro had designed them to be fail-safe. Each pod had redundant power supplies, redundant cooling systems, redundant monitoring. If one system failed, another took over. If all systems failed, the pod would automatically warm the sleeper and wake them. He had tested the pods extensively, but testing on Earth was different from operation in deep space. The first year revealed minor issues: calibration drift, sensor noise, slight variations in temperature that needed correction. Taro addressed each issue as it arose, tweaking the systems, improving their performance. The second year was quieter. The pods stabilized. The sleepers slept. The awake crew settled into their routines. They celebrated the second anniversary of the launch with a small party. They watched recordings of Earth. They shared memories. They talked about what they would do when they reached the new world. In the third year, a crisis arose. One of the pods developed a fault. The temperature began to rise. Taro caught it early, but the sleeper had to be woken to repair the pod. The man who emerged was disoriented and frightened. He had been dreaming of Earth. He did not know it was gone. Taro and Dr. Patel helped him adjust. They showed him the ship. They explained the situation. He processed the news with surprising calm. I knew, he said. Part of me knew. I dreamed of fire. He chose to return to cryo sleep after the repairs were complete. He wanted to arrive at the new world with the others. Taro respected his courage. The fourth year brought a different challenge. A crew member developed symptoms of psychological distress. The isolation was wearing on her. She had trouble sleeping. She had trouble focusing. She spent hours staring at the stars. Dr. Patel diagnosed her with a form of space adaptation syndrome, exacerbated by the knowledge that Earth was gone. They adjusted her schedule. They gave her more time in the observation dome. They paired her with a buddy who checked on her regularly. She recovered slowly. By the fifth year, she was stable. Taro prepared the pods for the first shift change. He would wake the next team and go to sleep himself. He checked each pod one last time. 90 sleepers. Frozen in time. They had been asleep for 5 years. They would sleep for 45 more. He entered his own pod. He lay down on the cold surface. The lid closed. The cooling began. He dreamed of Earth, green forests, blue oceans, white clouds. He dreamed of home. 47 years passed in the blink of an eye. For the sleepers, it was nothing. A moment of darkness between one breath and the next. For the awake crew, it was a lifetime. Generations of wakekeepers lived and worked and died in the corridors of the last ark. Children were born. Children grew up. Children took their parents' places among the wakekeepers. They knew only the ship. They had never seen a sky or felt rain or breathed air that was not recycled. They were children of the ark. And they carried the mission forward. Alina's pod opened on schedule. She gasped as the cold retreated and warmth flooded her body. Her limbs were weak. Her mind was foggy. She lay still, letting the systems adjust her to consciousness. A face appeared above her. A woman she did not recognize. Welcome back, Commander, the woman said. I am Lieutenant Maya Okonkwo, granddaughter of Sarah Okonkwo. Elena blinked. Granddaughter? How long? 47 years. Lieutenant Okonkwo said. We are approaching the target system. Elena sat up slowly. The ship felt different, older. The corridors were worn. The equipment showed signs of decades of use. But the systems were running. The mission was on track. She made her way to the bridge. The view screen showed a star. Not just any star. Their destination. Kepler 442. A K-type orange dwarf. Smaller and cooler than the sun. And orbiting it, a planet. A blue-green planet. Elena stared at the image. Is that it? She asked. That is Kepler 442b. Lieutenant Okonkwo said. Initial scans show an atmosphere compatible with human life. Liquid water. Temperatures within habitable range. It is everything we hoped for. Elena felt tears in her eyes. After 50 years. After the destruction of Earth. After a journey that had spanned half a century and untold light years. They had arrived. Begin the awakening sequence. She said. Wake them all. It is time to see our new home. One by one, the cryopods opened. The 90 emerged. Confused and disoriented. Their bodies stiff from decades of sleep. They were helped to medical bays. Examined. Treated. And gradually reintroduced to consciousness. Amara woke to a world that was not Earth. She knew that intellectually, but seeing the blue-green planet on the view screen made it real. She was not on Earth anymore. She would never see Earth again. But she was alive, and there was a world waiting for them. The ship entered orbit around Kepler 442b. Scans confirmed what they had hoped. The planet was Earth-like. Not identical. The gravity was slightly lower. The atmosphere had a slightly different composition. The forests were purple instead of green. But it was habitable. It was home. Elena addressed the crew. Tomorrow, we send a landing party. She said, we explore. We confirm. And if everything is as it seems, we begin the next chapter of human history. We go down. We build. We live. The crew cheered. After 50 years and 47 light-years, humanity had arrived at its new home. The signal came in the 47th year. It was faint, barely detectable above the background noise of the universe. But it was there. A repeating pattern. An artificial signal. Lieutenant Maya Okonkwo detected it during a routine scan. She was the great-granddaughter of Sarah Okonkwo. Born on the ship, raised among the stars. She had never known Earth. She had never walked on a planet. But she knew the mission. She knew the destination. And she knew that this signal changed everything. She called Commander Reyes, the current Wakekeeper leader. We have a signal, she said, from the target system. Reyes studied the data. The signal was organized, structured. It was not a natural phenomenon. It was a beacon. There is someone there, Maya said. Someone sent this signal. We do not know who. Reyes said. Or what, but we are going to find out. The ship accelerated its approach. The signal grew stronger. It was a navigation beacon, designed to guide ships to a safe trajectory into the system. It was ancient. The technology was unlike anything humans had ever developed. The Vorathi had built it. The ship entered the system 48 years after leaving Earth. The first images of Kepler 442b appeared on the screens. It was blue and green. Like Earth. It had oceans and continents and clouds. It had an atmosphere. It had life. The crew gathered in the observation dome. They stared at the planet that would be their new home. It is beautiful, Maya whispered. It is home, Reyes said. But they knew they were not alone. The beacon proved that, somewhere on that planet, another civilization was waiting. The question was whether they would be friends or enemies. The 100 began to wake. The cryopods opened one by one. The sleepers emerged, confused and hopeful, their bodies stiff from decades of frozen sleep. They were helped to medical bays. They were given time to adjust. They were told about the signal. Some were afraid. Some were excited. All were determined. Elena was among the last to wake. She emerged from her pod, old and tired but still sharp. She listened to the briefing about the signal, about the beacon, about the evidence of an alien civilization. She looked at the image of the blue-green planet. We came all this way, she said. We are not turning back now. Prepare the landing party. We are going down. And we are going to meet our neighbors. The landing party descended in 2 shuttles, each carrying 10 crew members. Elena led the first shuttle. James Chen was beside her, his xenobiology kit strapped to his chest. He had waited his whole career for this moment. The shuttles broke through the cloud layer and the planet revealed itself. It was stunning. The sky was a soft lavender color, the result of a different atmospheric composition. The ground was covered in vegetation that ranged from deep purple to bright red. A river wound through a valley, its water clear and blue. Mountains rose in the distance. The air, when they tested it, was breathable, slightly thin, but within human tolerance. The temperature was mild, around 20 degrees Celsius. It was a spring morning on an alien world. James was the first to step out. He stood on the surface of a planet that no human had ever touched. He knelt down and picked up a handful of soil. It was dark and rich, full of organic matter. Life had been growing here for millions of years. This was not a dead world. It was a living one. The landing party spent the first day exploring. They collected samples of soil, water, air, and vegetation. They tested for pathogens and toxins. They mapped the immediate area and identified a suitable location for a settlement. The valley was sheltered, with access to fresh water and flat land for farming. It was perfect. Amara walked through the purple forest, marveling at the alien beauty. The trees were tall and slender, with leaves that spiraled around the trunks. Small creatures darted through the undergrowth, unfamiliar shapes that moved with a grace she had never seen. She thought about her classroom in Accra, the blackboard, the desks, the faces of her students. They would never see this, but she would describe it to them. In a way, she would write it down. She would make sure that humanity remembered what it had found. On the second day, they discovered something that changed everything. James found it. He was analyzing water samples from the river when he noticed something unusual. The water contained organic compounds. Complex organic compounds. The kind that could only be produced by intelligent life. He called Elena. "Commander," he said, "you need to see this." She came to his makeshift laboratory. "What is it?" "The water contains traces of synthetic compounds," he said. "Industrial byproducts. This planet is not uninhabited." Elena stared at him. "Are you saying there is a civilization here?" "I am saying there is intelligent life," James said. "Or there was. These compounds are recent. Weeks, maybe days old. We are not alone." Elena looked out at the purple forest, the beautiful, peaceful, welcoming forest somewhere out there. Another species was watching, and they had no idea what that species wanted. The shuttle descended through the lavender sky. The planet unfolded below them. A tapestry of purple forests and blue rivers and mountains that caught the light of the orange sun. It was beautiful. It was alien. It was home. James sat at the observation window, his heart pounding. He had dreamed of this moment his entire life. First contact. The meeting of two civilizations. He had studied xenobiology and xenolinguistics and a dozen other disciplines, all in preparation for this. The shuttle landed in a clearing near the river. The hatch opened. James was the first to step out. The air was cool and clean. It smelled of unfamiliar vegetation, of damp earth, of life. He stood on the surface of an alien world and felt the gravity of the moment settle over him. The Vorathi found them within hours. They emerged from the forest with an elegance that was almost hypnotic. Their blue-green skin shifted with patterns of light. Their large eyes studied the humans with curiosity and caution. James raised his hand in greeting. He spoke slowly, using the words he had learned from the beacon's linguistic patterns. "We come in peace," he said. "We are refugees from a destroyed world. We seek shelter." The Vorathi elder stepped forward. It studied James with ancient eyes. "You are far from home," it said in its own language. James understood. The words were different, but the meaning was clear. "Yes," he said, "we are." The elder turned and spoke to its companions. There was a long exchange of clicks and whistles. Then the elder turned back. "You may stay," it said, "for now, but there are others who will not welcome you. You must be careful." James nodded. "We understand. We will be respectful." The elder made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Respect is good," it said, "but it will not save you from the warriors. They respect nothing but strength." The elder turned and walked back into the forest. The other Vorathi followed. James stood alone in the clearing, processing what had just happened. He had made first contact. It had been peaceful, but the warning was clear. Not all of the Vorathi wanted them there. The shadow of conflict loomed over their new home. The Vorathi found them on the third day. They emerged from the forest without warning. A group of 12 figures that moved with an eerie grace. They were tall, averaging 7 feet in height, with slender bodies and long limbs. Their skin was a deep blue-green, patterned with subtle stripes that shifted color as they moved. Their faces were angular, with large dark eyes and small mouths. They carried no weapons. At least, none that were visible. The landing party froze. Elena raised her hand in what she hoped was a universal gesture of peace. The Vorathi stopped. They stared. For a long moment, neither group moved. Then the lead Vorathi stepped forward. It made a sound, a series of clicks and whistles that seemed to come from deep in its throat. The sound was complex, musical, almost it was language. James stepped forward carefully. He had studied xenolinguistics as part of his training. He knew that communication with an alien species would require patience and observation. He pointed to himself. "James," he said. Then he pointed to the Vorathi leader. The Vorathi tilted its head. It seemed to understand. It pointed to itself and made a sound. "Vorath, that is their name," James said. "Or at least, what they call themselves." The Vorathi leader, Vorath, made another series of sounds. It pointed at the humans, then at the ship in the sky, then back at the forest from which it had come. It seemed to be asking a question. "Where did you come from? Why are you here?" Elena stepped up beside James. "Tell them we come in peace," she said. "Tell them we need their help." James spread his hands, trying to convey openness. He spoke slowly, using simple words. "We come from far away," he said. "Our world was destroyed. We seek a new home. We mean no harm." Vorath watched him intently. Its eyes moved between James's face and his hands, reading his body language. Then it turned and spoke to its companions. There was a rapid exchange of clicks and whistles. Then Vorath turned back. It made a gesture, a clear invitation. "Follow." The Vorathi led them through the forest to a settlement. It was not a city by human standards. It was more like a village. A collection of structures built from living trees, shaped and grown rather than constructed. The Vorathi lived in harmony with their world. They did not dominate it. They coexisted with it. The settlement was home to perhaps 100 Vorathi. They came out to look at the humans. Their large eyes filled with curiosity. Children hid behind their parents. Elders studied the newcomers with ancient, knowing gazes. Elena looked around at the alien village. The purple trees, the blue-green people, the strange and beautiful world that was now their only hope. "We need to learn their language," she said to James. "We need to understand them before we make any mistakes that cannot be undone." The attack came without warning. One moment the landing party was setting up their camp, organizing supplies, preparing for the first night on the new world. The next moment, energy bolts were striking the ground around them. Sarah was the first to react. "Take cover," she shouted. "Get behind the shuttle." She grabbed her sidearm and returned fire, covering the others as they ran for safety. James dragged the medical supplies behind a rock. He could see the attackers now. They were Vorathi, but different from the ones they had met. Taller, more muscular, their skin patterns sharp and aggressive. They moved with military precision, firing in coordinated volleys. One of the settlers screamed. A bolt had caught her in the shoulder. She fell, clutching her arm. James ran to her, ignoring the energy bolts that sizzled past his head. He pulled her behind the shuttle and began treating the wound. It was bad. The energy bolt had cauterized the wound, but the damage was extensive. She needed proper medical attention. "We have to get out of here," Sarah shouted over the chaos. "The shuttle can take 4 at a time. I will cover the first group." The evacuation was a nightmare. The shuttle lifted off with the first 4 wounded, including the woman James had treated. It would be 20 minutes before it could return. 20 minutes of holding off an alien attack. Sarah organized the defenders. They took positions behind rocks and equipment. They fired carefully, conserving ammunition. The Vorathi warriors pressed the attack. But they were cautious. They did not want to damage the shuttle or its supplies. They wanted the humans gone. They wanted to send a message. James stayed low, treating injuries as they came. A graze on a leg. A burn on an arm. Nothing life-threatening. But the fear in the settler's eyes was a wound he could not treat. The shuttle returned. The second group boarded. Then the third. Finally, it was just James, Sarah, and 2 others. They made a run for the shuttle as the Vorathi closed in. Energy bolts struck the ground at their feet. James stumbled. Sarah grabbed his arm and pulled him forward. They dove into the shuttle as the hatch closed. The shuttle lifted off. Outside, the Vorathi warriors watched them go. They did not pursue. They had made their point. The humans were not welcome. James sat on the floor of the shuttle, breathing hard. He looked at Sarah. "What now?" he asked. She stared out the window at the receding planet. "We go back to the ship," she said. "We figure out another way. We did not come this far to give up now." The first week was peaceful. The Vorathi were cautious but curious. They allowed the humans to observe their village, to study their language, to learn their ways. James made rapid progress. He identified patterns in their language, basic vocabulary, grammatical structures. He learned that Vorath was not a name but a title, meaning speaker or elder. The leader's actual name was something unpronounceable in human vocal cords. He learned that the Vorathi were herbivores. They did not eat meat. They lived in harmony with their ecosystem. They had no concept of war. Or so he thought. On the 8th day, everything changed. A group of Vorathi arrived from the north. They were different from the ones in the village. Taller, more muscular. Their skin patterns were sharper, more aggressive. They carried weapons. James saw them first. He was in the village, working on his translations. When the northern Vorathi marched in, they spoke in harsh tones. The village Vorathi seemed afraid. Vorath, the elder, stepped forward to speak with them. The conversation was heated. Gestures were made toward the human camp. Voices rose. Then one of the northern Vorathi pushed Vorath aside and walked toward James. It stood over him, its large dark eyes filled with something that looked very much like anger. It spoke. James did not understand all the words, but he understood the meaning. "Go. Leave. This world is not yours." He backed away slowly, his hands raised. The northern Vorathi followed, its weapon raised. It made another sound, a threat, a warning. "Leave now, or die." James ran back to the human camp. He found Elena. "We have a problem," he said. "There are more Vorathi warriors. They have weapons, and they want us gone." Elena's face hardened. "How many?" "Dozens," James said. "Maybe more. And they are not interested in talking." Elena made a decision. "Evacuate the landing party," she said. "Get everyone back to the shuttles. We are returning to the ship." The evacuation was chaotic. The northern Vorathi pursued them, firing weapons that discharged bolts of energy. The humans ran. They reached the shuttles as energy bolts struck the ground around them. The shuttles lifted off just as the Vorathi reached the landing site. From the air, Elena watched the village shrink below them. The Vorathi elder stood at the edge of the forest, watching them leave. It had not raised a weapon. It had not joined the attack. It had simply watched. James saw it too. "Not all of them want us gone," he said. Elena nodded. "I know, but it only takes one faction to start a war. And we are in no position to fight one." The ship orbited in silence. The mood was somber. The attack had left everyone shaken. They had been on the planet for less than a day, and already they had been driven off. Elena convened a meeting of the senior staff. We have two options, she said. We can leave and search for another world. Or we can find a way to coexist with the Vorathi. The first option is risky. We have limited fuel. If we leave and do not find another habitable planet, we will drift forever. The second option is also risky. But we have seen that there are at least two factions among the Vorathi. The villagers who welcomed us, and the warriors who attacked us. We need to understand why. James spoke up. The elder mentioned warriors. He said they respect nothing but strength. But he also said there are others who might help us. The nomads. Elena raised an eyebrow. Nomads? Sonara arrived the next day. She came to the landing site alone, walking out of the forest with her hands raised. James recognized her as one of the villagers who had been present at first contact. She had come to warn them. The warriors are gathering, she said. They see you as a threat. They believe you will try to take their world. We do not want to take anything, James said. We just want a place to live. Sonara nodded. I know, she said, but the warriors do not believe that. They have been fighting for so long that they have forgotten how to trust. James studied her. You are not like them, he said. I am a memory keeper, Sonara said. I remember the old ways. Before the war, when the Vorathi welcomed strangers. When we reached for the stars instead of hiding from them. Can you help us? Elena asked. Sonara was quiet for a long moment. I can try, she said, but it will not be easy. The warriors are led by a male named Voran. He is not evil. He is afraid, and fear makes people do terrible things. She looked at Elena. If you want peace, you must first understand his fear. And then you must show him that you are not what he fears. Elena nodded. We can do that, she said. We have to. There is nowhere else to go. Back on the ship, the mood was grim. The 100 had come so far. They had survived the destruction of Earth. They had traveled 50 years through the void. They had found a perfect world. And now that world was denied to them. Elena convened a meeting of the senior staff. We have two options, she said. We can leave and search for another world. Or we can stay and find a way to coexist with the Vorathi. The first option is risky. We have fuel for one more major course correction. If we leave and do not find another habitable planet, we will drift forever. The second option is also risky. We have seen that some Vorathi are hostile. But we have also seen that some are not. We need to understand the situation better before we make a decision. James spoke up. I have been analyzing the language, he said. The Northern Vorathi used a word I did not recognize. It sounded like a name. A place. I think they were talking about something that happened in the past, a conflict. A war. They see us as a threat because they have been threatened before. By whom? Sarah asked. That is what we need to find out, James said. Elena made her decision. We stay in orbit, she said. We observe. We learn. We send no more landing parties until we understand who the Vorathi are and why some of them fear us so much. The ship settled into orbit. A silent watcher in the sky. The days passed. The humans observed. They watched the Vorathi go about their lives. They saw the peaceful villagers tending their groves. They saw the northern warriors patrolling the borders. They saw a society divided. James spent hours at the observation scope, studying the Vorathi. He mapped their settlements, their migration patterns, their social structures. He identified 3 distinct groups. The villagers, who seemed peaceful and agricultural. The northern warriors, who were militaristic and expansionist, and a third group, a nomadic people who moved between the others, trading goods and information. The nomads, he realized, were the key. They traveled freely. They spoke to everyone. They knew the secrets of this world. If they could make contact with the nomads, they might find a way through the conflict. He took his findings to Elena. There is a third group. he said. Nomads. They move between the Vorathi factions. They are neutral. If anyone can help us understand this world, it is them. Elena studied his data. Can you find them? She asked. James pointed to a region on the map. They are here now, he said. A nomadic camp. About 200 kilometers from the village. We could send a small team. It is risky, Elena said. I know, James said. But it is our best chance. Elena nodded. Prepare the mission, she said. But this time, we do it carefully. No mistakes. The journey to the warrior stronghold took 3 days. Sonara led the way through forests and across plains, following paths that were invisible to human eyes. James and Sarah accompanied her. Elena stayed behind to manage the ship. The stronghold was carved into a mountainside. It was ancient, its walls covered in carvings that told the history of the Vorathi people. James studied them as they walked. He saw images of a golden age, of cities and towers and ships. The Vorathi had once been great. They had traveled between stars. They had built an empire. Then something had gone wrong. The carvings showed a war, a civil conflict that had torn their civilization apart. The survivors had retreated to this world, cut themselves off from the universe, and built walls to keep the unknown out. The warriors were the descendants of those who had built the walls. They had inherited the fear of their ancestors, and they saw the humans as a reminder of everything they had tried to forget. Voran received them in a great hall. He was tall and powerful, his skin patterns sharp with authority. He did not offer them seats. Why do you come here? He asked. His voice was cold. We come to seek peace. James said. We mean you no harm. We only want a place to live. Voran studied him. Your kind destroyed your own world, he said. Why should we believe you will not destroy ours? Our world was destroyed by an asteroid, James said. A natural disaster. We did not cause it. We barely survived it. Voran was silent. Sonara stepped forward. She spoke in the ancient tongue, the language of the carvings. James could not understand the words, but he understood their effect. Voran's expression changed. The hardness softened, just slightly. When Sonara finished, Voran was quiet for a long time. Then he spoke. You may stay, he said, but there are conditions. You will settle far from our lands. You will not take what is ours. You will learn our ways and respect our laws. And you will teach us what you know of the stars. We have forgotten much. James felt a surge of hope. He looked at Sonara. She nodded. We accept your conditions, James said, and we offer one of our own. Let the nomads return to their homeland. They have wandered long enough. Voran looked at Sonara. Then he nodded. It will be done. The alliance was sealed, not with a ceremony, but with a shared understanding that survival required cooperation. The humans had found a home, and the Vorathi had found a path back to the stars. The mission was small. James, Sarah, and Taro. 3 people, 1 shuttle, minimal equipment. They landed at night, under the cover of darkness. Far from the nomadic camp, they approached on foot, using the light of the planet's 2 moons to navigate. The camp was a collection of tents made from animal hides, arranged in a circle around a central fire. The nomads were awake, gathered around the flames. They were singing. The sound was haunting, a melody that rose and fell like the wind. James stopped at the edge of the camp. He listened. The song told a story. He could not understand the words, but he understood the emotion. It was a song of loss, of a home that had been taken, of a people who had been displaced. These nomads were refugees. They had been driven from their original homeland by the northern warriors. They had been wandering ever since, searching for a place where they could live in peace. James stepped into the firelight. The singing stopped. The nomads stared at him. He raised his hands. We come in peace, he said. using the Vorathi words he had learned. We are refugees too. Our world was destroyed. We seek a new home. An elder stood up. She was old. Her skin patterns faded with age. She walked toward James and studied him with ancient eyes. You are not Vorathi, she said in her language. No, James said. We are from far away. We are human. The elder nodded slowly. We know, she said. The warriors told us about you. They say you are dangerous. They say you will destroy our world as you destroyed your own. That is not true, James said. Our world was destroyed by a force of nature. An asteroid. We did not cause it. We barely survived it. The elder was silent for a long moment. Then she spoke. I am called Sonara, she said. I am the memory keeper of my people. I know the stories of 1,000 years. And I know that the warriors are afraid. Not of you. Of what you represent. Change. The unknown. They have controlled this world for so long that they have forgotten how to welcome strangers. Can you help us? James asked. Sonara looked at the fire. I can try, she said, but the warriors are powerful. And they do not listen to the voices of nomads. James sat down by the fire. The other nomads slowly returned to their places. The singing resumed, softer now, a backdrop to conversation. James and Sonara talked through the night. She told him the history of the Vorathi, the ancient civilization that had risen and fallen, the war that had divided them, the warriors who had seized power and driven out those who disagreed. The nomads were the descendants of the exiles. They had been wandering for generations, preserving the old knowledge, waiting for a time when peace might return. James told her about Earth, about the asteroid, about the 100 survivors and their journey, about their hope for a new home. Sonara listened. When he finished, she said, You and I are not so different. Both refugees. Both searching for a place to belong. Perhaps we can help each other. James smiled. I would like that, he said. The settlement rose from the southern continent's soil with surprising speed. The humans had brought modular building systems, designed to be assembled quickly with minimal tools. The Vorathi contributed local materials and knowledge of the land. Together, they built a village. The first structure was the community hall, a large building that served as kitchen, meeting space, and medical clinic all in one. It was built in 3 days. The second was the greenhouse, a transparent dome where David planted the first crops. The seeds from Earth took to the alien soil with surprising vigor. Within weeks, green shoots were pushing through the dark earth. The third was the school. Amara insisted. The children needed to continue their education. They needed to learn the history of Earth, the skills they would need to survive, the values that would shape their society. The school was a simple building, open to the air, with a roof of woven leaves. But it was a place of learning, and that made it sacred. The 100 settled into their new lives. They established routines. They divided labor. They created a government, a simple democracy where every adult had a vote. Elena was elected leader. She accepted the role with humility. I will serve as long as I am needed, she said, but this is not a command. This is a community. We all have a voice. The Vorathi watched from a distance. At first, they were cautious, but gradually, they began to approach. They traded goods and knowledge. They shared meals. They told stories. The children were the first to bridge the gap. They played together without prejudice, without fear. They learned each other's languages with the ease of the young. Sonara visited often. She sat with Amara in the school, teaching the children Vorathi history. She sat with Elena in the community hall, advising on matters of diplomacy. She became a bridge between the species. The first year on the new world was a year of building. Not just buildings, but relationships, trust, understanding. The 100 had come to this world as refugees, but they were becoming something more. They were becoming a people. A new people, forged from the ashes of Earth and the hope of a new beginning. The alliance with the nomads was fragile but real. Sonara agreed to act as a mediator between the humans and the Vorathi factions. She knew the language of the warriors. She understood their fears. She believed she could find a way to open negotiations. Elena authorized a formal diplomatic mission. James, Sarah, and Sonara would travel to the warrior stronghold and request a meeting with their leader. It was dangerous, but it was the only path forward. The stronghold was a fortress carved into a mountainside. It was ancient, built long before the warriors had taken power. The walls were covered in carvings that told the history of the Vorathi people. James studied them as they walked through the gates. He saw images of a golden age, of cities and towers and ships that sailed between the stars. The Vorathi had once been a spacefaring civilization. They had traveled to other worlds. They had built an empire. Then something had gone wrong. A catastrophe. A war. A fall from grace. The carvings showed the decline. The cities crumbling. The ships grounded. The people turning inward, afraid of the unknown they had once embraced. The warriors were the descendants of those who had survived the fall. They had built their identity on fear. Fear of outsiders. Fear of change. Fear of repeating the mistakes of their ancestors. The warrior leader was a male named Voran. He was tall even by Vorathi standards. His skin patterns sharp and aggressive. He received them in a great hall lit by glowing crystals. "Why do you come here?" Voran asked. His voice was harsh, but there was curiosity beneath the hostility. "We come to seek peace," James said. "We did not know this world was inhabited. We thought we were alone. We have nowhere else to go. Our world was destroyed." Voran studied him. "We know of your world's destruction," he said. "Our sensors detected the energy release. It was a great loss." "It was," James said, "but it brought us here. And we do not want to bring conflict to your world. We want to live in peace." Voran was silent. Sonara stepped forward. She spoke in the ancient tongue, the language of the carvings. James could not understand the words, but he felt their power. She was telling a story of exile and wandering and the hope for a home. When she finished, Voran was quiet for a long time. Then he spoke. "You may stay," he said, "but there are conditions. You will settle on the southern continent, far from our lands. You will not take resources that we need. You will learn our ways and respect our laws. And you will teach us what you know of the stars. We have forgotten much. Perhaps you can help us remember." James felt a surge of hope. He looked at Sonara. She nodded. "We accept your conditions," James said, "and we offer a condition of our own. Let the nomads return to their homeland. They have wandered long enough." Voran looked at Sonara. Then he nodded. "It will be done." The alliance was sealed, not with a treaty or a ceremony, but with a shared understanding that survival required cooperation. The humans had found a home, and the Vorathi had found a path back to the stars. The second year brought new challenges and new triumphs. The settlement expanded. New families formed. Children were born. The 100 became 200. Then 3. As the cryopods were emptied and the sleepers integrated into the community, the ship was dismantled piece by piece. Its materials incorporated into the growing town. The engines became power plants. The hull became roofs and walls. The computers became the backbone of the settlement's information network. Nothing was wasted. Taro worked with Vorathi engineers to develop a power grid that combined human and alien technology. Solar panels and wind turbines stood alongside crystalline energy storage units that the Vorathi had developed centuries ago. The system was efficient and sustainable. It could power the settlement for generations. James continued his study of Vorathi culture. He traveled between the villages, documenting languages and customs and histories. He discovered that the Vorathi had a rich literary tradition, epic poems and philosophical treatises that stretched back thousands of years. He began translating them into human languages. The work was painstaking but rewarding. Each translation was a bridge between worlds. Sarah trained a defense force of humans and Vorathi. They practiced together, learned each other's fighting styles, developed joint tactics. She believed in peace, but she believed in preparedness too. The warriors respected her discipline. They saw her as a worthy ally. Amara's school grew. Human and Vorathi children studied side by side. They learned math and science and history. They learned the language of both species. They learned that difference was not a threat but an opportunity. Sanara watched the school with approval. "This is the future," she said to Amara. "These children will grow up without the fears that plague our generation. They will build a world we cannot even imagine." Amara smiled. "That is the hope," she said. "That is why we do this." The settlement celebrated the second anniversary of the landing with a festival. There was music and food and dancing. Humans and Vorathi celebrated together, their laughter rising into the lavender sky. Elena stood at the edge of the celebration, watching. She thought about Earth. She thought about the billions who had been lost. She thought about the 100 who had carried humanity across the stars. "We made it," she whispered to the wind. "We are home." The southern continent was beautiful. It was covered in rolling plains and ancient forests, with rivers that ran clear and cold. The climate was mild, similar to Earth's Mediterranean regions. It was everything they had hoped for. The 100 descended from the ship in waves. Shuttles carried supplies and equipment. The cryopods were dismantled and repurposed. The ship itself became a source of materials, its hull and systems stripped to build the first permanent structures. The settlement grew quickly. The Vorathi, both villagers and nomads, helped. They knew the land. They knew which plants were edible and which were poisonous. They knew where to find fresh water and how to predict the weather. They shared their knowledge freely. Amara was put in charge of education. She set up a school in a large tent, where the children of the 100 learned to read and write and calculate. But they also learned the history of Earth, the cities and cultures and achievements of humanity, the mistakes they had made, the lessons they had learned. Amara wanted the next generation to remember where they came from. She wanted them to honor the memory of Earth. David Muller planted the first crops. The soil was rich, more fertile than anything he had worked with on Earth. The plants grew quickly under the lavender sky. Within months, they had their first harvest. It was not Earth food, but it was food. It sustained them. Taro worked with Vorathi engineers to establish a power grid. They built solar arrays and wind turbines, adapted from designs he had developed on Earth. The Vorathi contributed their own technology, crystalline structures that could store and transmit energy efficiently. Together, they built a system that powered the entire settlement. James continued his study of Vorathi culture. He traveled between the settlements, learning, documenting, building relationships. He became a bridge between the species, a translator not just of language but of understanding. Sarah organized the defense of the settlement, not because she expected attack, but because she believed in being prepared. She trained a small militia, built watchtowers, established communication protocols. The warriors respected her preparedness. It showed them that the humans were serious about protecting what they had built. Elena oversaw everything. She was the leader, the final authority, the person everyone turned to when things went wrong. She carried the weight gracefully, drawing on decades of experience in command. At night, she would walk to the edge of the settlement and look up at the stars. Somewhere out there was the debris field that had once been Earth. Somewhere out there was everything she had lost, but here, on this new world, she had found something worth protecting. a future, a home, a reason to keep going. Not all Vorathi accepted the peace. A faction of hardliners, led by a warrior named Vorik, had opposed the alliance from the beginning. They believed that the humans were a disease that would infect their world. They believed that the only good human was a human who had left. Vorik was a veteran of the old wars. He had fought against the nomads when they were driven from their lands. He had seen what conflict did to his people. He believed that isolation was the only path to survival. The humans were a threat to that isolation. They had to be removed. Vorik gathered followers among those who shared his fears. They met in secret, planning and preparing. They stockpiled weapons. They recruited fighters. They waited for the right moment to strike. The attack came on a quiet night. Vorjak's forces struck the settlement's supply depot, destroying a month's worth of food and medicine. They left a message painted on the wall in crude human script. Leave. Elena convened an emergency meeting. This is the work of Vorik, Sonara said. He has been gathering support for months. I warned Vorin, but he did not act. He did not want to start a civil war. Now Vorik has started one for him. What do we do? Sarah asked. Elena thought for a moment. We do not respond with force. She said, that is what Vorik wants. He wants to provoke us into a war that will turn the rest of the Vorathi against us. Instead, we respond with openness. We invite every Vorathi to visit our settlement. We show them who we really are. We let them see that we are not a threat. The invitation was sent. Vorik rejected it, but some of his followers were curious. They came to the settlement. They walked through the gardens. They met the children. They shared meals with human families. Some of them changed their minds. They returned to Vorik and told him what they had seen. The humans were not monsters. They were people, families, refugees, just like the Vorathi had once been. Vorjak's support began to erode. His followers drifted away. One by one, he grew angrier, more desperate. He planned one final attack. A direct assault on the settlement. But his plans were discovered. A former follower, a young warrior who had visited the settlement and seen the truth, warned the humans. Vorik is coming, he said. Tonight, Sarah organized the defense. But Elena had a different idea. Let him come, she said, but do not fight him. Greet him. Offer him food. Offer him peace. Sarah stared at her. That is insane. Perhaps, Elena said, but it is the only way to end this without bloodshed. Vorjak's force arrived at midnight. They found the settlement's gates open. The streets were lit with lanterns. Tables had been set with food. And Elena stood at the entrance. Alone. Waiting. Welcome, she said. We have been expecting you. Vorik stopped. He did not know what to do. He had prepared for a battle. He had not prepared for an invitation. Elena smiled. Come, she said. Eat with us. Talk with us. See who we really are. Then decide if you still want to fight. Vorik stood frozen. Then, slowly, he sheathed his weapon. He walked forward. He sat at the table. The war that could have been became a meal. And the meal became the beginning of understanding. The first year on the New World was a year of challenges and triumphs. The settlers faced storms unlike any on Earth, with winds that howled across the plains and rain that fell in sheets for days. They learned to read the weather, to prepare, to protect their fragile settlement. They faced diseases, alien microbes that interacted with human biology in unexpected ways. Dr. Patel worked around the clock, developing treatments, learning the new biology of this world. She saved lives. She lost some too. Each loss was a wound that the community felt deeply. They faced accidents. A farmer injured by unfamiliar equipment. A child who fell from a tree. A fire that destroyed a storage building. Each crisis brought them closer together. They learned that survival depended on cooperation. and they celebrated. The first child born on the new world was a girl named Nova. She was the daughter of two settlers, a biologist from France and an engineer from Indonesia. Her birth was a milestone. It meant that humanity was not just surviving on this world, it was thriving. Elena held the baby in her arms and looked at her tiny face. "You are the first," she whispered, "but you will not be the last. You are the future." The Vorathi celebrated with them. Sanara came to the naming ceremony and presented the baby with a gift. A necklace made of polished stones that she said would bring protection. It was a gesture of friendship that meant more than any treaty. The nomads found their homeland again. Sanara led them back to the region they had been driven from generations ago. It was overgrown, wild, but still beautiful. They began rebuilding. The humans helped, providing tools and materials. It was a symbol of the new relationship between their peoples. The warriors kept their distance, but they did not attack. They watched, they waited, and slowly, they began to change. Some warriors visited the human settlement, curious about the strange beings from another world. They traded goods and stories. They learned each other's languages. They began to see each other as individuals, not as threats. Voran himself came to the settlement once. He walked through the streets, looking at the buildings, the gardens, the people. He spoke with Elena in the community hall. "You have built well," he said. "In a short time. We had good teachers," Elena said. She looked at him. "And good neighbors." Voran nodded. "There is still much distrust among my people," he said, "but there is also curiosity." "That is a start." "It is," Elena agreed. "That is all we need. A start." The school at the border became a symbol of unity. It stood where the human settlement met the Vorathi lands. A round building with walls of living trees and a roof that opened to the sky. Human and Vorathi children studied together, played together, grew together. They learned each other's languages. They learned each other's histories. They learned that the fears of their parents did not have to be their own. Amara was the school's first teacher. She taught the children of both species with patience and wisdom. She told them stories of Earth, of its beauty and its flaws, of the lessons humanity had learned. She told them stories of the Vorathi, of their golden age and their fall, of their long journey back to the stars. She taught them that difference was not danger, that diversity was strength, that the future belonged to those who could build bridges instead of walls. The school was also a research center. James worked there, studying Vorathi biology and culture. He discovered that the Vorathi had a sophisticated understanding of genetics, developed during their golden age. They had mapped their own genome and learned to edit it. They had used this knowledge to adapt to different worlds. He also discovered that the Vorathi had a latent psychic ability. They could sense the emotions of others, communicate wordlessly over short distances. It was a trait that had atrophied over generations of isolation. But it was still there. The Vorathi children, the ones who attended the school with humans, were developing this ability more strongly than their parents. The presence of humans, with their different emotional signatures, seemed to stimulate it. Sanara called it the gift of the strangers. "You have awakened something in us," she told Elena. "Something we had forgotten. Something we had lost." Elena looked at the children playing in the schoolyard. Human and Vorathi, running together, laughing together. They were the future, and the future was bright. She took Sanara's hand. "Then let us make sure we do not lose it again," she said. Together, they walked into the school. The children greeted them with smiles. The lesson was about to begin, and the universe was full of possibilities. Not all Vorathi accepted the humans. A faction of hardliners, led by a warrior named Vorik, saw the alliance as a betrayal. They believed that the humans would eventually destroy this world as their own had been destroyed. They saw the settlement as an invasion. Vorik gathered followers among those who feared change. He preached a message of purity and isolation. The Vorathi had survived the fall of their civilization by closing themselves off from the universe. The humans threatened that isolation. They had to be removed. The tension simmered for months. Then it boiled over. A group of Vorjak's followers attacked a human supply convoy. They did not kill anyone, but they destroyed the supplies and left a warning. Leave this world or face the consequences. Elena convened an emergency meeting. This is what we feared, she said. A faction that will not accept peace. What do we do? Sarah asked. Vorik is not the majority, Sonara said. But he is loud. He plays on fear. The same fear that has controlled my people for generations. Can Vorin stop him? James asked. Sonara shook her head. Vorin is the leader of the warriors. But he does not have absolute power. If he moves against Vorik too aggressively, it could cause a civil war. We cannot let fear win, Elena said. But we also cannot ignore the threat. We need to find a way to show Vorjak's followers that we are not a danger to them. How? Sarah asked. Elena thought for a moment. We invite them to see what we have built, she said. We open our settlement to anyone who wants to visit. We show them who we really are. Not invaders. Not threats. Refugees. Just like them. The invitation was sent. Vorik rejected it, but some of his followers were curious. They came to the settlement. They walked through the gardens. They ate the food. They met the children. They saw that the humans were not monsters. They were people. Families. Individuals trying to build a life. Some of them changed their minds. They returned to Vorik and told him what they had seen. Vorik was not convinced, but his support began to erode. The hardliners grew smaller, quieter. They did not disappear, but they lost their power to threaten the peace. Elena knew the threat was not gone forever. There would always be those who feared the unknown. But she also knew that the best way to fight fear was with understanding. And understanding took time. They had time. They had a world. They had each other. The message was sent on the 5th anniversary of the landing. It was a simple transmission. A beacon that pulsed with the story of humanity's survival. It contained coordinates. It contained descriptions. It contained an invitation. If you are out there, if you survived, come find us. Elena watched the transmission leave the system. It would travel at the speed of light, spreading outward into the galaxy. It would take years to reach even the nearest star. But it was sent. The message was out. She thought about the other arcs. There had been plans for more than one. Other nations, other coalitions, had proposed their own ships. She did not know if any of them had succeeded. But she had to believe that some had. She had to believe that humanity was not just 100 souls on a single world. She had to believe that the species she belonged to had found other paths to survival. The message was her gift to the future. A beacon in the darkness. A signal that said, we are here. We survived. We are still human. Sonara stood beside her. You are hoping, she said. Elena nodded. I am hoping that we are not alone. That there are others out there who survived. That we will find each other someday. Sonara looked up at the stars. The Vorathi had once sailed between them. She said, perhaps we will again. Perhaps your message will be the first step. Elena smiled. Perhaps, she said, but even if no one ever hears it, it was worth sending. Because it means we have not given up. We are still reaching for the stars. The transmission continued its journey. A faint signal in the vastness of space. It passed through the heliosphere of Kepler 442. It entered the interstellar medium. It began its long journey across the light years. Somewhere out there, perhaps, another species was listening. And somewhere out there, perhaps, another group of refugees was searching for a home. The message traveled on, carrying hope, carrying the story of humanity's survival. carrying the promise that even in the face of annihilation, life finds a way. The second year brought new developments. The settlement expanded. More buildings rose. New crops were planted. The population grew as more children were born. The 100 became 200. Then 3. The ship was fully dismantled now. Its materials incorporated into the growing town. The cryopods became greenhouses. The engines became power plants. The hull became roofs and walls. Nothing was wasted. James continued his work as a bridge between the species. He compiled a dictionary of the Vorathi language. Thousands of words with translations and usage notes. He documented their history, their customs, their beliefs. He wrote a book, the first book written on this new world. It was called Understanding the Vorathi. It became required reading for every human on the planet. Taro worked with Vorathi scientists on a joint project. They were building a telescope. Not just any telescope, a space telescope that would allow them to study the galaxy from their new home. The Vorathi had once been astronomers. They had mapped the stars. But they had lost that knowledge over generations of isolation. The humans helped them rediscover it. The telescope was launched on the second anniversary of the settlement. It was a small satellite, crude by Earth standards. But it worked. It sent back images of distant galaxies, nebulas, stars. The Vorathi gathered around the screens, watching with wonder. They were looking at the universe again. After centuries of fear, they were looking up. Sonara came to Elena with a proposal. "We want to build a school," she said. "A school where Vorathi and human children can learn together. They will grow up knowing each other. They will not have the fears of their parents. They will build a future together." Elena thought it was a wonderful idea. The school was built at the border between the human settlement and the Vorathi lands. It was a round building, open to the air, with walls made of living trees shaped by Vorathi techniques. The curriculum included human science and Vorathi philosophy, Earth history and Vorathi legends. The children who attended the school learned to see the universe through two sets of eyes. They learned that difference was not danger. It was opportunity. The school became a symbol of what the two species could achieve together. It was not just a building. It was a bridge between worlds, a bridge between past and future, a bridge that would carry them forward, together, into the unknown. The Vorathi telescope was completed in the 7th year. It was a joint project, built by human and Vorathi engineers working together. The telescope was a satellite, positioned in orbit around Kepler 442b. It could see deeper into the universe than anything the Vorathi had built before. Taro was proudest of this achievement. He had worked with Vorathi scientists to combine human optical technology with Vorathi crystalline sensors. The result was a telescope that could detect planets around distant stars, analyze their atmospheres, search for signs of life. The telescope's first target was Earth's solar system. They wanted to see what had become of their home. The images took years to arrive, even at the speed of light. But when they came, they were worth the wait. Earth was gone. The planet that had been humanity's home for 200,000 years was a scarred, barren rock. The atmosphere had been stripped away. The oceans had boiled off. The surface was a wasteland of impact debris. There was nothing left. The 100 gathered to see the images. They stared at the screen in silence. Some cried. Some held each other. Some simply stared, unable to process the final confirmation of their loss. Elena stood at the front of the room. She had known what they would see. She had prepared herself for this moment. But knowing did not make it easier. "This is what we left behind," she said. "This is why we are here. Not because we chose to leave, but because we had to. We are the survivors. We carry the memory of Earth. We carry the future of humanity. Let us honor the dead by living." Let us honor our lost world by building a new one. She looked at the image of the dead planet. Goodbye, Earth, she whispered. We will remember you. The telescope turned to other targets. It found planets around other stars. Some were barren. Some were gas giants. Some were promising candidates for life. The universe was full of possibilities. And the 100 were just beginning to explore them. The telescope became a symbol of their new beginning. Not just a tool for looking outward, but a reminder of where they had come from. And a promise of where they were going. 5 years after the settlement was established, Elena gathered the community for an announcement. We have been here for 5 years. She said, we have built a home. We have made friends. We have faced challenges and overcome them. But there is something we have not done. Something we need to do. She paused. We need to send a message back to Earth. Or what is left of it. We need to tell whoever might be listening that humanity survived. There was murmuring in the crowd. Earth is gone. Someone said. There is no one to hear. We do not know that. Elena said. There may be other survivors. Other arcs. Other colonies. We owe it to them to announce our presence. The message was prepared over the following weeks. It was recorded in multiple languages. It contained the story of the Exodus Initiative, the destruction of Earth, the 50-year journey, the discovery of Kepler 442b, the meeting with the Vorathi, the building of the settlement. It contained coordinates and descriptions and an invitation. If you are out there, if you survived, come find us. We are home. The transmission was sent on a clear night, when the stars were bright and the sky was filled with the light of 1,000 worlds. The signal traveled at the speed of light, spreading outward into the galaxy. It would take years to reach even the nearest star. But it was sent. The message was out. The next day, life continued. The crops needed tending. The children needed teaching. The buildings needed repairing. The work of building a civilization did not stop for sentiment. But there was a new feeling in the air. A sense of connection. A sense that they were not alone. Sonara found Elena at the edge of the settlement, looking up at the stars. You are hoping, Sonara said. Elena nodded. I am hoping that someone out there hears our message. That we are not the last, that humanity continues somewhere else. Sonara stood beside her. We Vorathi once sent messages into the void. She said. We hoped for answers. None came. We stopped sending. Perhaps we stopped too soon. Perhaps the answers were on their way. Elena looked at her alien friend. Perhaps they were. She said. Perhaps they still are. They stood together under the lavender sky. Two beings from different worlds. United by hope. The stars looked down on them. And somewhere out there, the message traveled on. Carrying the story of humanity's survival. Carrying the hope of a species that refused to die. The first child born on Kepler 442b was named Nova. She was the daughter of a biologist from France and an engineer from Indonesia. Two of the original 100 who had found love in the long years of the journey and the settlement. Nova's birth was a milestone. It meant that humanity was not just surviving on this new world. It was thriving. The community celebrated her arrival with a festival. There was music and dancing and food from both human and Vorathi traditions. Gifts were brought from every corner of the settlement. Sonara came with a necklace of polished stones. A Vorathi tradition meant to protect the wearer. She placed it around Nova's tiny neck. May you grow strong under the light of two suns. She said. May you be a bridge between worlds. Nova grew quickly, as children do. She was the first of a new generation. Children who had never known Earth, who had never breathed its air or felt its sun. They were children of Kepler 442b, children of the stars. Amara taught them in the border school. She taught them the history of Earth. She taught them the language of the Vorathi. She taught them that they belonged to two worlds and that their heritage was a gift. The children learned quickly. They picked up languages with ease. They formed friendships across species lines without the prejudices of their parents. They played together, studied together, grew together. They were the future that Elena had dreamed of. They were the proof that the 100 had succeeded. Elena watched them from the edge of the schoolyard. She was old now, her hair white, her face lined with the years. But her eyes were still bright. Her spirit was still strong. Her granddaughter, Nova, was among the children playing. The girl was a reminder of everything they had fought for, everything they had sacrificed, everything they had built. Elena smiled. It was worth it, she whispered to the wind. Every sacrifice, every loss, every moment of fear, it was worth it. She turned and walked back toward the settlement. Behind her, the children laughed and played. The future was in good hands. 20 years after the landing, the settlement was a city. Not a large one, by Earth standards, but a thriving community of thousands. Humans and Vorathi living together, working together, building a future. The 100 original settlers were growing old. Some had died, their bodies laid to rest in a cemetery on a hill overlooking the city. Their graves faced the stars, a reminder of where they had come from. Elena was 72 years old. Her hair was gray, her face was lined, but her eyes were still sharp, still filled with the fire that had driven her across the galaxy. She served as an advisor now, not a commander. The next generation had taken over. They had been born on this world. They had never known Earth. They had never felt the reign of their ancestors' homeworld. But they had been taught its history. They knew the story of the Exodus. They knew the names of the 100. They knew that they were the descendants of refugees who had refused to die. James Chen had died 5 years earlier. Peacefully. In his sleep, his work lived on. The Vorathi Dictionary, the history of the species, the records of first contact. His legacy was written in the understanding between two peoples. Sonara had died too, 10 years after the settlement was founded. She had lived to see her people return to their homeland. She had lived to see the school built. She had lived to see peace. Her name was spoken with reverence by both humans and Vorathi. Taro had retired to a small house near the coast. He spent his days fishing and watching the waves. He had designed the systems that kept the settlement running. He had earned his rest. Sarah had become the leader of the settlement's defense force. She trained young humans and Vorathi together, building a unified guard that protected the peace. Amara's school had grown into a university. Humans and Vorathi studied together, learned together, discovered together. The children of the 100 had become the leaders of a new world. And the message that Elena had sent 20 years ago was still traveling, still carrying its hope across the light years. Elena sat on a bench overlooking the city. A young woman sat beside her, her granddaughter. The girl was 15, born on this world, curious about the one her grandmother had left behind. "Tell me about Earth again," the girl said. Elena smiled. She had told the story 1,000 times. She would tell it 1,000 more. Earth was beautiful, she said, blue and green and white, full of life, full of people. It was our home for 200,000 years. And then it was gone. But we are still here. We survived. We found a new home. And we built a new life. That is the legacy of Earth. Not the destruction, the survival. The girl looked out at the city. The Vorathi towers. The human buildings. The school at the border. The children playing together in the streets. "I am glad you survived, Grandma," she said. Elena put her arm around her granddaughter. "So am I," she said. "So am I." 20 years after the landing, the settlement was a city. It had grown beyond anything the original 100 could have imagined. The population had swelled to thousands. As new children were born and the Vorathi integrated more closely with human society. The city was a blend of human and Vorathi architecture. Sleek human buildings stood alongside living Vorathi structures, shaped from trees and crystals. The streets were lined with gardens. The air was clean. The city hummed with the energy of a civilization finding its feet. Elena was 92 years old. She moved slowly now, with a cane, but she still walked the streets every morning, greeting people, listening to their concerns, offering advice. She was the elder of the city, the living memory of Earth. The children came to her with questions. What was Earth like? Was it beautiful? Did you know you would never go back? She answered each question with patience. Earth was beautiful, she would say, but so is this world. We carry Earth in our hearts. But our home is here now. The Vorathi had changed too. The fear that had held them captive for generations had faded. They had rediscovered their heritage. They had built new ships, new telescopes, new dreams. They were reaching for the stars again. Vorin had died peacefully. Years ago, Vorik had become an advocate for peace, transformed by the meal that had ended the war. Sonara had passed away, but her legacy lived on in the school and the library, in the hearts of everyone who had known her. James had finished his dictionary of the Vorathi language. It was a massive work, thousands of pages, documenting every word and phrase and grammatical structure. It was his gift to the future. Taro had retired to a small house near the coast. He spent his days fishing and watching the sunset. He had earned his rest. Sarah still trained the defense force, though there had been no conflict in years. She was preparing for threats that might never come, but she believed in being ready. Amara's school had become a university. Human and Vorathi scholars studied together, pushing the boundaries of knowledge. They were discovering new things every day. The city was a beacon, a testament to what could be achieved when people worked together across the boundaries of species and culture. It was the dream that the 100 had carried across the stars. And it had come true. 50 years after the landing, the city was a beacon of civilization. It was home to 10,000 souls, human and Vorathi, living in harmony. The original settlement had grown beyond anything the 100 could have imagined. There were schools and hospitals and laboratories and parks. There was art and music and literature. There was a university where the brightest minds of both species came together to push the boundaries of knowledge. There was a spaceport, built by the combined efforts of human and Vorathi engineers. Small ships launched from it regularly, exploring the system, mining asteroids, building a future among the stars. The Vorathi had rediscovered their heritage. They had built new ships, new telescopes, new dreams. The fear that had held them captive for generations had faded. In its place was hope. The original 100 were almost all gone now. Only a handful remained, elderly and wise, the living memory of Earth. Elena was among them. She was 102 years old. She moved slowly, with the help of a cane. But her mind was still sharp. Her voice still carried authority. She had lived to see her granddaughter become the leader of the settlement. She had lived to see peace become permanent. She had lived to see the dream fulfilled. On the 50th anniversary of the landing, a ceremony was held. The entire city gathered in the central square. Humans and Vorathi stood together, remembering the journey that had brought them here. Elena was helped to the podium. She looked out at the crowd. The faces of two species, the children of refugees and the descendants of exiles. Together, they had built a world. 50 years ago, she said, we landed on this world. We were refugees. We were afraid. We did not know if we would survive. But we had hope. And we had each other. She paused. The crowd was silent. Today, I look around and I see not refugees. I see a people, a community, a civilization. We have done what humanity has always done. We have faced the impossible and refused to yield. We have taken the worst that the universe could throw at us and turned it into something beautiful. She raised her hand to the sky. Out there, somewhere, the signal we sent is still traveling, still carrying our story, and someday, someone will hear it, and they will know that we survived. They will know that hope is stronger than fear, that life is stronger than death, that even in the darkness of space, the light of civilization can shine. She lowered her hand. Let us remember the Earth. Let us remember the 100 who carried humanity across the stars. Let us remember that we are all refugees, all survivors, all dreamers, and let us look forward to the next 50 years, to the next 500, to a future among the stars, built by our hands, together. The crowd cheered. The sound rose into the lavender sky, a celebration of survival, a hymn to hope. Elena stepped down from the podium. Her granddaughter took her arm. That was beautiful, Grandma, the young woman said. Elena smiled. It was the truth, she said. That is all I have ever tried to give you. The truth, and a future. They walked through the city together, under the light of an alien sun. The streets were full of life. Children played, adults worked, two species, side by side, building a world. The sun set over the city, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Another day ended on Kepler 442b. Another day of survival, another day of hope, and somewhere out there, the message traveled on, a beacon in the darkness, a reminder that humanity had not died. It had only changed. It had found a new home, and it would never stop reaching for the stars. 50 years after the landing, the message that Elena had sent reached its destination. It arrived at a small research station orbiting a red dwarf star, 40 light-years from Kepler 442b. The station was crewed by a species that called themselves the Listeners. They had been monitoring the stars for centuries, waiting for a sign that they were not alone. The message was weak, barely detectable above the background noise. But the Listeners had sensitive instruments. They caught the signal and amplified it. They decoded it. They read the story it contained. The destruction of Earth, the journey of the 100, the discovery of Kepler 442b, the meeting with the Vorathi, the building of a new civilization. The Listeners listened to the message 3 times. Then they sent a reply. We hear you. The reply said, we are here. We have been waiting. The reply traveled back across the light years. It would take 40 years to reach Kepler 442b. But it was sent. The connection was made. On Kepler 442b, the city had grown into a nation. Humans and Vorathi lived together in peace. Their societies intertwined, their futures linked. They had built a civilization that honored the past while reaching for the future. Elena was gone now. She had died peacefully, surrounded by her family, her work complete, but her legacy lived on in every aspect of the society she had helped build. Nova, her granddaughter, was the leader of the settlement now. She was a woman of both worlds, comfortable in human and Vorathi society. She carried the wisdom of her grandmother and the hope of her generation. The reply from the Listeners arrived on the 50th anniversary of the landing. The whole community gathered to hear it. The message was simple. We hear you. We are here. We have been waiting. Nova stood at the podium, the message in her hands. She looked out at the crowd. Humans and Vorathi, standing together. 2 species, 1 world, 1 future. We are not alone, she said. The universe has answered our call. Somewhere out there, another civilization is waiting to meet us. The journey that began with the 100 has led us here. But it does not end here. It continues. Out there, among the stars. She raised her hand to the sky. The crowd cheered. The sound rose into the lavender sky. A celebration of connection. A hymn to hope. The stars looked down on Kepler 442b. On a world where refugees had found a home. On a world where 2 species had learned to live together. On a world where humanity had survived. The message had been heard. Humanity was not alone, and the future was as vast and infinite as the universe itself.